Christmas Eve, the streets glistened with frost, each carol faintly drifting from decorated windows. The snow, though light, carried the weight of winter in its cold embrace, and every breath I took felt like a reminder of the years I had spent apart from the one person I had loved more than anything, my son, David. My hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, as I drove slowly through the familiar streets of his neighborhood. My heart raced with hope and fear, mingling like storm clouds in a winter sky. Tonight, if this story moved you, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more powerful tales and life lessons. I had spent days choosing gifts not expensive, but meaningful, a leather-bound journal, because I remembered how David had once written poetry in the quiet hours of his teenage years, a pair of gloves knitted by my sister, warm enough to fight the harshness of December nights, and the old wooden model ship he had admired in a shop window years ago, the one I promised him I would buy when he turned 21. Small gestures, but gestures filled with a father's love, long hidden under years of mistakes, misunderstandings, and distance. As I pulled into his driveway, my chest tightened. The house looked the same as I remembered, yet different somehow. The lights twinkled cheerfully, the wreath on the door vibrant, a stark contrast to the heaviness in my heart. I stepped out of the car, the snow crunching under my shoes, and for a moment I let myself imagine a warm reunion, his face lighting up, a hug, a smile, maybe even laughter, filling the room again like it used to. But reality has a cruel way of shattering dreams before they even begin. I approached the door slowly, rehearsing the words I would say, the apologies I would offer, the stories I would share to remind him of all the love I had carried silently. All these years, the key turned, and I rang the bell. A heartbeat later, the door swung open, and there he was, my son, my boy, David, standing there, tall, imposing, and entirely unfamiliar to me. His eyes, once so full of childhood mischief, were cold, distant, and almost accusing. "You're early," he said, voice clipped, polite in the way strangers might greet each other at a store. I opened my mouth, about to respond, but the words caught in my throat. I could see the tension in his shoulders, the deliberate way he avoided eye contact. Then, without warning, the words I had feared for years spilled from his lips. "You were never there for me. I don't need you now." Time froze. The snowflakes falling gently outside seemed to hang mid-air, mocking the quiet devastation. Inside me, I had imagined many scenarios for tonight, none of which included this. I wanted to speak, to explain, to cry out that I had loved him every day, in every silent, invisible way, but my voice betrayed me. It refused to come. All I could do was nod, as if acknowledging a truth that wasn't really there. Truth I had carried for decades, one that he had never seen, never wanted to see. The door closed. Just like that, the sound echoed through my chest, a hollow drum marking the death of hope I had brought with me. I stepped back into the snow, the cold biting through my coat, into my very bones, matching the ache that spread through me. I had imagined warmth tonight, the smell of pine, the sound of laughter, the comfort of being welcomed, but instead, I had a door slammed in my face, and a silence so loud it drowned out my own heartbeat. As I trudged back to the car, the memories came unbidden. The nights I had stayed awake, worrying about him, sacrificing sleep and comfort so he could chase his dreams. The years I had worked multiple jobs, sometimes skipping meals, to ensure he had opportunities I never had. Teaching him to ride his bike, to tie his shoes, to face the world with courage. Every scraped knee, every tear, every laugh, they were mine too. And yet, tonight, none of it mattered. I realized in that instant that love alone could not bridge the gap of resentment he had carried for years. Driving home was a blur. The streets passed in a gray haze, the headlights of passing cars reflecting in my tear-filled eyes. I thought of his mother, long gone, and how I had raised him alone, doing the best I could with the pieces life had given me. She would have been proud of how I had tried, proud that I had not let bitterness define me, but pride felt like ash in my mouth now. What I had thought was my second chance had become a confirmation of every fear I had ever had. Perhaps he never truly loved me as I loved him. The house I returned to was empty, save for the ticking of the clock and the quiet hum of the heater. I set the gifts on the table, untouched by the rejection that hung heavily in the air. I sank into my chair, staring at the flickering shadows cast by the Christmas tree lights. The ornaments shimmered, but there was no joy in their reflection, only a cold, piercing loneliness. I thought of all the Christmases I had imagined with him, the small traditions I had hoped to continue, the smell of cinnamon, the warmth of cocoa, the quiet reading by the fire, and I realized that tonight none of that existed anymore. Tonight, love had been met with a wall, and I had nothing but the cold to keep me company. Sleep came fitfully that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, heard his words, echoing in my mind. I relived the door closing over and over, each repetition carving deeper into my heart. I questioned everything, my choices, my sacrifices, my worth. Was love enough? Was it ever enough? The pain was not just of rejection, but of invisibility, of being unseen by the very person I had lived for. I thought I had done everything right, but in the mirror of his eyes, I was wrong. I was invisible. The following days were a haze. I wandered through my apartment, staring at reminders of a life half-lived for the sake of someone else. Old photographs, birthday cards, forgotten toys, letters I had kept, evidence of a love that had gone unnoticed. I replayed conversations, remembered the little victories, and mourned the times he had chosen resentment over gratitude, anger over understanding. It was a grief unlike any other, compounded by the irony that all the love I had given freely, silently, secretly, had never reached him in a way he could acknowledge. And yet, in that grief, a seed of clarity began to grow. I realized that love, while essential, was not everything. Respect mattered. Recognition mattered. And perhaps the greatest lessons came not from being accepted, but from being true to oneself, despite rejection. I thought about what it meant to continue to give when the heart had been refused, when efforts were invisible, when sacrifices were met with coldness instead of warmth. But life, as it often does, has a way of surprising us. Just as the sorrow seemed endless, an unexpected development arrived, a letter, official, formal, unassuming in its plain envelope. A reminder that truths sometimes come not from words spoken, but from revelations unforeseen. And in that moment, I sensed that the story was far from over. That the door slammed in my face was not the end, but perhaps the beginning of something neither of us could have anticipated. I sat by the window that night, staring at the falling snow, my heart still aching, and whispered to the empty room, "David, I've loved you all my life, even if you cannot see it, even if you cannot feel it. I have." The cold pressed against the glass, but the warmth of that silent truth, finally acknowledged by me alone, settled deep in my chest. Whatever tomorrow would bring, I knew one thing: I had done all I could to love him, and sometimes love alone is enough, even if it is unseen. The days following that Christmas rejection were long, silent, and suffocating. I wandered through my apartment like a ghost, each room a shrine to memories that had once been full of life but now felt hollow. The smell of pine from the artificial tree barely reached me. The twinkling lights seemed to mock the emptiness in my chest. I could not escape the echo of David's words, harsh and final. "You were never there for me. I don't need you now," I repeated them over and over, searching for some crack in their cruelty, some explanation that could soften the blow. There was none, only the cold truth that love, no matter how deep, does not guarantee recognition. As I sat in the quiet, my thoughts drifted back to every sacrifice I had made, every silent act of support that David had never known. I remembered late nights in my tiny apartment, counting the bills I could barely afford, just to cover a tuition payment for a college he had begged for. I remembered the mortgage I had helped with, quietly transferring funds so he could have a home without struggling. The business I had funded behind the scenes, a trust set up in his name, all invisible, all unnoticed, all unacknowledged. I realized then, with a bitter pang, that my love had been hidden so well that it had gone unrecognized. Perhaps that was the source of his anger, his resentment. Then, as if the universe had waited for the perfect moment, a letter arrived. It was formal, embossed with the insignia of a law firm I had employed years ago, and yet I did not recognize the urgency until I saw the weight it carried. David had received it, though it was sent months prior, detailing every financial contribution I had made in his name. The words were clinical, official, and yet they spoke louder than any plea I could have made. Student loans fully paid, mortgage assistance ongoing, business support guaranteed through a hidden trust. I read it twice, thrice, the proof of my silent devotion now fully undeniable. A strange sense of vindication coursed through me, tempered by the grief that still clung to my heart. The truth, so long hidden, had finally arrived, yet it was bittersweet. David would now see the reality of what he had taken for granted, but would recognition lead to gratitude or only deepen his shame? I did not know, and perhaps I did not care entirely. For years, I had given freely, without expectation, and now, the only course that seemed honest was to act with clarity, decisiveness, and moral integrity. I made a choice. The trust that had quietly supported David for so long would be redirected. Every cent, every asset, every hidden gesture of my devotion, I would withdraw. I would donate it to charity, to causes that needed it, to strangers whose gratitude could not wound me. I would remove the invisible hand that had held him up, not out of anger, but out of principle. Respect, I realized, must be earned, and it could not be demanded, nor silently assumed. In the days that followed, I took the steps necessary to formalize my decision. phone calls to lawyers, meetings with trustees, paperwork meticulously signed. Each action was deliberate, measured, and accompanied by a sense of calm I had not felt since the night of the rejection. It was as if the cold winter air outside had finally seeped into my veins and solidified a resolve that had been forming silently for decades. I would no longer be invisible, yet I would no longer fight for recognition that was not freely given. Meanwhile, I heard rumors, secondhand whispers, that David had discovered the letter, that he had read every line, every figure, every hidden act of devotion that I had quietly orchestrated. And with that discovery came panic, fear, and desperation. Calls went unanswered, messages left on voicemail unread. He tried to reach me, but I did not respond. Silence, I reminded myself, was sometimes the most powerful message one could send. It was not cruelty. It was clarity. I imagined him pacing his apartment, realizing that the foundation of support he had always assumed was eternal, could be withdrawn at any moment. I imagined the weight of regret pressing down, the guilt gnawing at him, the recognition of every wrong choice he had made. I did not relish this suffering. It was not revenge in the way stories told. It was justice in the simplest, most honest form. I had given love freely, and now I gave him the truth, unshielded, unsoftened, undeniable. Yet, even as I contemplated these days of quiet justice, I could not escape the memories. I remembered the night he had graduated high school, the pride swelling in my chest as he tossed his cap into the winter sky. I remembered holding his tiny hands in mine as he learned to walk, teaching him to face the world without fear. I remembered the birthdays, the scraped knees, the heartbreaks and triumphs, all of it, every detail, woven into a tapestry of silent devotion. And I realized, in the deepest part of me, that no legal document, no withdrawal of funds, no punishment could erase the love I had carried for him. It was eternal, regardless of acknowledgement. Days passed. David's calls became frantic, his messages more desperate, each one pleading, apologizing, acknowledging the hidden truth I had kept from him. He did not know how to face me. How could he? He had rejected me, dismissed my love, and now he had seen the cost of his ignorance. And yet, the more he reached out, the more I felt a strange detachment settle over me. Not coldness, exactly, not bitterness, but clarity. I was no longer a man defined by his son's recognition. I was a man who had given freely, loved deeply, and acted with integrity. That alone was enough. I walked through the empty streets, one evening, snow crunching beneath my shoes, thinking about the lessons life had taught me. I thought about the meaning of love, respect, and consequence. I realized that for decades I had defined my worth by David's perception of me, by his acceptance, by the fleeting warmth of approval. And in that revelation, I found liberation. The power I had sought was not in his acknowledgement, but in my choices, in my actions, in the moral clarity that guided me. I imagined him reading the letter for the first time, the shock spreading across his face, the recognition dawning too late. I imagined the conversations he would have with himself, the sleepless nights, the regret pressing down like a relentless winter storm. And I did not gloat. I did not relish it. I only felt peace. Finally, the years of invisible devotion were laid bare, and the truth, unvarnished and undeniable, was in the world. And yet, even as I withdrew my support, even as I redirected it to causes that would not fail me with ignorance or ingratitude. I knew one thing: this was not revenge. It was justice tempered with love. It was the act of a father who had given everything, who had been rejected, and who now chose dignity over desperation. The silence I maintained, the decision not to respond immediately, the quiet withdrawal of support, these were the tools of clarity, the instruments of moral integrity, the language of a heart that had loved too long in vain. Each day, as I watched the snow fall outside my window, I felt the weight of this choice and the relief it brought. I realized that silence could be more powerful than any argument, any confrontation, any attempt to force recognition. In the quiet, I found my own value, my own worth, independent of the fragile perceptions of another. And in that quiet, I discovered strength I had long forgotten existed, a strength born not of anger, but of the serenity of knowing I had done everything I could, and that was enough. The knock on the door was hesitant, almost trembling. I had been expecting it, and yet when I heard it, a strange tension settled over me. I did not rush to open. I stood silently, listening. Each knock seemed to carry the weight of a lifetime of regret, the sound heavy with desperation. Finally, I moved toward the door, slowly, deliberately, as if each step was measured against the years of pain and sacrifice behind me. David stood there, smaller than I remembered, not in height, but in presence. His eyes were wide, not with anger this time, but with the raw vulnerability of a son who had finally understood the consequences of his own actions. He opened his mouth, closed it, and tried again. "Dad, I didn't know. I never realized." His voice cracked, the words failing him as emotion overtook control. He stepped closer, the cold seeping through his jacket, but I felt no warmth. I only felt the quiet strength of knowing I had made the right choices. "I didn't reject you because I wanted to hurt you," I said softly, my voice steady despite the storm of emotion roiling beneath. "You rejected me with your words, but you see, what I did for you all these years, silently, without asking, without showing off, was never about recognition. It was about love. And sometimes, love isn't enough for someone who refuses to see it." David's eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, I saw the child he had once been, the one who had clung to my hand, trusting, innocent, full of hope. I made a mistake," he whispered. "I didn't understand. I'm so sorry, Dad. I never meant to. I didn't know what I had." I looked at him, really looked, and the pain in his expression mirrored the regret I had imagined. Yet, my own heart did not soften in the way he had hoped. Not yet. I had made a choice days ago, a decision rooted in principle, in dignity, in the realization that love unacknowledged is still love. But it does not compel me to endure humiliation or disrespect. "David," I said, voice calm but firm, "the truth is here now. You know everything. The support, the sacrifices, the years you thought I wasn't there. I was, and yet you rejected me. What happens next is up to you. But understand this: respect cannot be demanded. It cannot be bought, borrowed, or hidden. It must be given freely." His shoulders slumped. "I understand now. I can't undo the past." The words hung in the air, heavy, final, and yet sincere. He had learned the hard way, and the lesson had come too late for comfort, but just in time for reflection. I wanted to reach out, to embrace him, to feel that warmth of reconciliation, but I held myself back. This was not about punishment, it was about clarity, about showing him that every action has consequences, and sometimes the greatest lessons are learned in the silence that follows rejection. We stood there, father and son, the space between us filled with years of misunderstanding, pride, and quiet devotion. The Christmas lights reflected in his tearful eyes, casting fragmented colors across his face, and I realized that no gesture, no explanation could fully undo what had been done. But the truth had been revealed, undeniable and complete. Sometimes that is enough. I don't know how to make it right, David admitted. I don't even know if I deserve. His voice trailed off, lost in the gravity of realization. I shook my head slowly. Deserve is not the point. Love is not transactional. You do not earn it by acknowledgement, nor lose it by ignorance. You experience it, and you carry it, and I have carried it for you all my life. That will never change. For a long moment, silence reigned. It was not the silence of avoidance, but the silence of understanding, of respect, of recognition, of consequences, and within it, a strange peace settled. The storm of emotions, the anger, the heartbreak, the confusion ebbed, leaving clarity in its wake. I had given freely, I had acted with integrity, and I had upheld my principles. That alone defined me, not the approval or forgiveness of another. David finally spoke again. Softer this time, humility threading each word. I'll try to be better, to understand, to respect. He looked at me with a mixture of remorse and hope, and I knew that he had begun the process of internalizing the lessons of rejection and revelation. It was not complete, it would not be perfect, but it was a start, and sometimes a start is all life allows. I stepped aside, gesturing for him to enter, but I did not move closer. The warmth of the house beckoned, yet the space I maintained was deliberate. He needed to earn his place, not just in the home, but in the respect he had failed to give. I would not shield him from consequence, yet I would not deny him the possibility of redemption. Love, I had learned, must be accompanied by principle, and forgiveness does not erase the lessons of experience. As he entered, awkwardly, hesitantly, I spoke once more, my voice carrying the weight of decades of experience, sorrow, and clarity. David, understand this. Life will test you. People will fail you. And sometimes, those we love the most will seem absent, indifferent, even cruel. But your actions, your respect, your integrity, these are yours to cultivate, not mine to enforce, not mine to grant. You will learn this in time, and when you do, perhaps you will understand why I made the choices I did. He nodded, swallowing hard, absorbing each word, and in that moment I realized that the power of a parent is not in forcing recognition or gratitude, but in demonstrating truth through action. Every silent sacrifice, every unacknowledged support, every hidden gesture of love had now been revealed. I had taught the hardest lesson of all, that respect and understanding cannot be demanded. They must be discovered, recognized, and embraced willingly. Later, as he left, a quiet tension remained, but not bitterness. The lessons were not forgotten, the truths not denied, and I, sitting by the fading glow of the Christmas lights, understood the ultimate moral of this experience. Love is infinite, respect is earned, and consequences are real. And sometimes the most powerful response to rejection is not retaliation, not anger, but silence. A silence that speaks louder than any argument, louder than any plea, louder than any regret. I reflected on the Christmas tree, its ornaments catching the dim light, casting reflections that danced across the walls like memories of years past. I thought of all the times I had hoped for recognition, for acknowledgement, for gratitude, and I realized that the need for validation had been an illusion. The true measure of love is not in its acknowledgement, but in its steadfast presence, in its willingness to endure, and in its moral clarity. And so, as the night drew to a close, I sat quietly, listening to the wind whistle outside, the snow piling softly against the window. I thought of David, of the lessons he had begun to understand, of the journey that lay ahead for him, and I knew that my path too was clear. I would continue to live with integrity, with love, with principle, and with the knowledge that my worth was never defined by acceptance, but by the choices I made, the love I gave, and the silence I maintained when the world demanded a reaction I could not afford to give. I whispered softly, almost to myself, almost as a final confession to the night. Sometimes the greatest revenge is silence, not anger, not retaliation, just silence. And in that silence, I found my peace. Not because I had one, not because I had been acknowledged, but because I had remained true to myself, to my principles, and to the love I had carried, unseen, unwavering, for decades.